The highway stretched into the distance under a heavy sky, the hum of crickets echoing through the night air. A dimly lit gas station stood alone at the roadside, its neon sign flickering in and out, as though even the light was too tired to stay alive. The silence of the place was only broken when a car pulled in, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Inside the vehicle sat a dog with fur the color of autumn leaves. His eyes, wide and bright, followed every movement of his owners. His nose pressed against the glass, fogging up the window as his tail thumped against the seat. To him, this was just another stop, another brief pause in the journey. He had no idea that destiny was about to twist cruelly before him. The man and woman who owned the car stepped out and walked toward the small convenience store attached to the station. The dog watched intently, ears perked, heart racing in anticipation. Every time the door opened, he thought they would return for him. His loyalty was complete, unquestioned, unshakable. Minutes dragged on. Then, suddenly, the couple re-emerged, their arms full of snacks and drinks. The dog barked once, excited, ready to be let out, ready to leap into their arms. But instead, the man slipped into the driver's seat, the woman into the passenger's, and the engine roared to life. Without so much as a glance back, the car rolled forward. The dog's world collapsed in an instant. He lunged at the window, barking desperately, his claws scraping against the door. The car moved faster, leaving the station behind, its tail lights glowing red before shrinking into the abyss of night. The dog scrambled free, chasing with all the strength in his legs. His paws slammed against the asphalt, nails clicking, breath ragged. But the car did not slow. His voice, filled with panic, was swallowed by the roar of the engine. At last, his body betrayed him, and he stumbled, stopping in the middle of the empty road. The vehicle was gone. The lights, the sound, the presence, gone. He stood there trembling, chest heaving, staring into the void that had taken away everything he knew. Slowly, he turned back to the gas station. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, indifferent to his pain. A lone attendant watched from a distance, pity etched into his expression, but powerless to intervene. The dog sat down on the cold pavement, his gaze fixed on the road where his family had vanished. The night grew heavier, the wind sharper. And yet, he remained, motionless, waiting, as if still believing they would come back for him. There, in the silence of the forgotten station, the first seed of heartbreak was planted. A faithful soul abandoned, left to face the cruel mystery of why love can vanish in the blink of an eye. The night dragged on, each second heavier than the last. The gas station, once busy with passing travelers, grew silent. The humming neon sign buzzed against the silence, the only companion for the dog who sat patiently by the road. His ears twitched with every distant sound, each passing car raising his hope only to crush it when none of them slowed. The air turned colder, dew beginning to gather on the concrete. The dog curled his body tighter, yet his eyes never left the highway. His gaze was filled with longing, a desperate belief that his family would return. Time, however, was merciless. Midnight passed. Then 1. Then 2. Still, he remained like a statue carved from loyalty. The station attendant stepped outside, his boots crunching on gravel. He approached slowly, kneeling just a few steps away. His hand stretched forward, offering a piece of bread. The dog lifted his head but made no move to eat. He sniffed the air, then turned his eyes back to the road. His hunger could not compete with his devotion. The man sighed, whispering words only the night could hear. He had seen many travelers come and go, but never had he seen such sorrow written in an animal's eyes. Still, he knew better than to force kindness where it was not wanted. With one last glance, he retreated, leaving the bread beside the dog before disappearing into the station once more. Dawn began to creep into the sky, painting it with strokes of gray and pale blue. The world was waking up, but for the dog, nothing had changed. His heart pounded with every car that passed, tail wagging for a brief moment of hope, before falling still again. The sun rose higher, but the chill inside him remained, an emptiness no warmth could touch. Children on their way to school stopped and stared, whispering to one another about the dog who sat like a soldier guarding an invisible master. Some even tried to call him, but he refused to budge. He belonged to one family only, the family that had abandoned him, though he refused to believe it. Hours stretched into another night. His fur grew dirty from the dust of the road, his body weaker with each passing day. Yet his spirit remained unbroken. Every sound of an engine sent his ears darting forward, every flash of headlights made his heart leap. But always, it was someone else. And so the days began to bleed together, a cycle of hope and despair. The forgotten station became his world, and the road his only prayer. Somewhere deep in his chest, the dog still clung to the belief that one day, the familiar car would return, and he would finally go home. But fate was not so kind. Something else was waiting for him, something darker, something that would test the very core of his loyalty. On the third night, the air was thick with humidity, the kind that clung to the skin and made the world feel heavy. The dog remained by the edge of the gas station, his body weaker but his spirit unshaken. His ears perked as a different sound broke through the quiet, a slow, rattling engine pulling into the station. A rusty pickup truck stopped by the pump. Its headlights dimmed, and out stepped a man with a long coat and sharp eyes that glimmered under the faint light. He looked around briefly, then his gaze landed on the dog. A smirk crept across his lips. The dog tensed. Something about this man felt different from the others who had passed by. His steps were deliberate, too quiet, like a predator circling its prey. He crouched low, patting his thigh, and called softly, "Come here, boy." His voice carried a sweetness that felt false, like honey masking poison. But the dog did not move. He stared back, ears flat against his head, tail stiff. He could not explain it, but instinct whispered that this man was not to be trusted. The stranger reached into his pocket and pulled out a piece of dried meat, tossing it on the ground. The scent was strong, irresistible to a hungry creature. The dog's stomach growled, yet his paws remained planted. Hunger battled with loyalty, and loyalty won. His eyes returned to the highway, ignoring the offering. The man's smirk faltered. He picked up the meat again and took a step closer, his coat brushing against the dusty ground. The station attendant noticed from inside the small shop, his eyes narrowing at the sight. He pushed open the door, calling out, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" The stranger straightened, his face shadowed. "Just being kind," he replied, voice cool, almost mocking. He gave the dog one last glance, then turned back to his truck. The engine roared and the vehicle rolled into the darkness, leaving only the faint stench of exhaust behind. The dog lay back down, but his heart thudded faster than before. He could not understand the man's intentions, yet something told him this was not the last time those eyes would return. The night grew still again, yet the memory of that gaze lingered. The gas station lights buzzed softly, but the shadows felt heavier, as though they carried secrets that even the dawn would not wash away. And in that silence, the story of the abandoned dog began to shift. For it was no longer just about waiting, it was about surviving the dangers that lurked in the corners of his new world. The gas station had grown into more than a waiting place. It had become a silent battlefield where the dog's loyalty clashed with the world's cruelty. Days turned into nights, and though his body weakened, his eyes never lost their fire. But unseen forces were circling him, forces that carried intentions far different from kindness. The stranger in the long coat returned. Not once, not twice, but several times. Always in the late hours when the road was quiet and the station almost empty. Each time, he lingered near the pumps, pretending to fill his truck, yet his eyes never left the dog. The station attendant grew uneasy. He knew trouble when he saw it. One evening, he tried to approach the dog again, kneeling on the ground with a bowl of water. This time, the dog lapped it up, his tongue desperate for relief. The man smiled faintly, whispering, "You're stronger than you look." But even as he comforted the animal, he felt it, the sensation of being watched. He turned quickly, and in the distance, under the dim halo of a street lamp, stood the stranger. His coat fluttered in the wind, his expression hidden in shadow, but the glint of his eyes burned through the darkness. A chill raced down the attendant's spine. He stood tall, shouting across the lot, "You have no business here." The words echoed, but the man did not move. He simply tilted his head, then turned and vanished into the night as silently as he had appeared. The dog's ears twitched. He sensed the tension in the air, sensed that danger was not gone but merely biding its time. He pressed his body against the attendant's leg for a moment, then returned to his usual spot by the roadside, eyes fixed once more on the highway. Later that night, the wind carried faint whispers through the station, as if the darkness itself was speaking. The dog lifted his head, ears pricked, muscles tight. It was nothing but the rustle of leaves, perhaps, but to him it felt like a warning. The night deepened. The station's flickering neon cast eerie patterns across the ground. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound seemed sharper. And in that uneasy silence, both man and dog knew the truth. This was not over. The road ahead was leading to something neither of them could yet see, something darker than abandonment, something that would demand every ounce of courage left in the faithful heart of the waiting dog. The days that followed carried a different weight. The sun no longer felt warm, and the nights stretched longer than before. The dog still guarded his place by the roadside, but the air around him seemed heavy, as though the world itself was warning him of something approaching. On the fifth evening, dark clouds rolled in from the horizon. They moved fast, swallowing the sky until no stars could be seen. The gas station lights flickered weakly, fighting against the growing gloom. A storm was coming. The dog lifted his head, nose twitching at the scent of rain mixed with something else, electricity, sharp and threatening. His fur bristled as the first drops began to fall, dotting the concrete with dark circles. Within minutes, the rain turned into a relentless downpour, drumming against the roof, flooding the gutters and soaking the ground in sheets of water. He ran for shelter beneath the small overhang of the convenience store, pressing himself against the cold wall. His body trembled, not only from the chill but from the roar of thunder that cracked across the heavens. Each bolt of lightning illuminated the station, carving sharp shadows that seemed to crawl closer each time the light faded. The attendant rushed outside, dragging crates and supplies to keep them from the flood. He glanced at the dog, shouting through the rain, "Stay close." The storm was too loud for his voice to carry, but somehow the animal understood. He stayed low, ears pinned, eyes darting between the man and the endless road. For a brief moment, the headlights of a car pierced through the curtain of rain. The dog's heart leapt. He stepped forward, tail lifting with hope. But the vehicle sped past, sending a spray of dirty water over him before vanishing into the storm. Hope, once again, was washed away. When the storm finally broke, the gas station lay soaked in silence. Puddles shimmered beneath the flickering neon, and the air smelled of wet asphalt and gasoline. The dog's fur dripped with rainwater, but his eyes remained locked on the road, refusing to rest. The attendant came out carrying a towel. He crouched, carefully drying the dog's soaked coat. "You shouldn't have to suffer like this," he muttered, his voice heavy with pity. But the dog only leaned slightly into the warmth of the cloth before pulling back, turning again toward the endless highway. His heart refused to shift. His family was still out there. Word of the waiting dog began to spread. Travelers passing through the station stopped to watch him, some taking pictures, others leaving scraps of food or bowls of water. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, asking why the dog never left. No one had an answer that would soothe them. One evening, a woman in a long blue dress knelt near the animal. Her voice was soft as she said, "You're a brave one, aren't you?" She set down a small blanket and some bread, her hands trembling as though she carried a wound of her own. The dog sniffed the air, cautiously taking a bite. For the first time in days, his tail gave a faint wag. The woman smiled through misty eyes, whispering, "I know what it feels like to be left behind." Her words dissolved into the night as she rose and walked away, leaving the blanket behind. The dog lay on it that night, curled tightly, though his gaze never left the highway. More strangers came and went, their kindness brief but sincere. They offered comfort, but never permanence. They were fragments of warmth passing through his cold vigil. None of them could replace the bond he still clung to. But as kindness bloomed around him, so too did the shadows. The stranger in the long coat returned once more, always at the edges of the night. He watched from the distance, silent, patient, as if waiting for the perfect moment to act. The gas station had become a stage where kindness and menace took turns in the spotlight. Days blurred into nights, yet the dog never abandoned his place. His loyalty held him there, anchored like a chain to the memory of those who had driven away. But one night the air shifted. The wind was colder, carrying with it the scent of something unfamiliar. The dog lifted his head, ears alert. The station lights flickered once, twice, then held steady. The road was empty, too quiet for this time of night. Then came the sound, the low rumble of an engine. A vehicle pulled into the station, its tires hissing over wet pavement. It wasn't the usual family sedan or a traveler's car. It was the rusty pickup truck. The man in the long coat stepped out. His movements were slower this time, deliberate, his eyes scanning the empty lot before settling on the dog. He knelt by the pumps, pretending to check his tires, but his gaze never broke. The attendant was nowhere to be seen. The convenience store was dark, closed early that night. The world had emptied itself, leaving only two souls in the quiet, one of loyalty, one of shadows. The man called out, voice low and coaxing. "You don't have to wait anymore. Come with me." He tossed another piece of meat onto the ground, the scent thick and sharp. The dog's stomach ached, but his paws stayed planted. Minutes passed. The man's patience thinned. His smile faded into something harder. He stepped closer, hand reaching into his coat. A leash glinted in the faint light. The dog backed up, hackles raised, a growl rumbling from deep in his chest. Lightning split the sky in the distance, illuminating the scene for a brief, terrifying instant. The man froze, his face lit with frustration. Then, as quickly as he appeared, he retreated. He climbed into his truck, slammed the door, and drove off, the roar of the engine echoing into the night. But when the silence returned, something was different. The blanket the kind woman had left, the one the dog had slept on, was gone. Vanished. Taken. The dog paced in circles, whining, sniffing the ground. His heart raced, his instincts screaming danger. For the first time, fear outweighed his loyalty, if only for a moment. Something precious had been stolen, not by neglect but by intent. And in that theft, a new threat was born. The stranger had not given up. He had marked the waiting dog as his own. The night after the blanket disappeared, the dog grew restless. He paced near the pumps, ears pricked at every sound, his growls low and constant. The gas station attendant noticed the change. He leaned against the door, whispering, "Something's not right, boy. I can feel it too." The dog didn't sleep. His eyes tracked the road, his body stiff, ready. The air was heavy, carrying the scent of oil and something else, something that made his fur stand on end. Near midnight, the sound came again. The low, rattling growl of an engine crawling out of the darkness. The pickup truck. Its headlights cut across the lot, flooding the dog in stark white light. The vehicle stopped abruptly. The man in the long coat stepped out, his movements sharp this time, no longer pretending. He carried the leash in one hand and in the other, a cage. The dog bolted before the man could take a step. His paws pounded against the wet asphalt, claws scraping, muscles burning. The stranger cursed under his breath and gave chase, his boots splashing through puddles. The cage clattered against his side as he ran. The dog darted between the pumps, circling the station, his body slick with rain. His heart thundered, but so did the stranger's footsteps, always close, always following. The attendant burst from the store, shouting, "Hey! Get away from him!" He grabbed a wrench from the counter and charged, but the man only laughed, retreating toward his truck. He didn't need to win tonight. He only needed the dog to know he could be hunted. The truck roared back to life, tires spinning, mud spraying into the air. The stranger leaned out the window as he sped off, his eyes glinting with a promise that this was far from over. The dog stood trembling, chest heaving, his fur plastered against his skin. The attendant dropped the wrench, kneeling beside him. "You're safe for now," he whispered, though his voice shook. He stroked the animal's head gently, but his eyes remained fixed on the road. Because he knew the truth. That man would return. And next time, he wouldn't come alone. The dog pressed himself closer to the attendant's side, shivering not just from the cold but from the knowledge that the road he guarded was no longer the only danger. Shadows now hunted him. Shadows with hands, eyes, and plans. The days that followed were quieter, but not with peace, only with waiting. The dog felt it in his bones, a tremor of unease that never left. Even when the sun rose and travelers passed through with kind hands and soft voices, his eyes were always on the road, his ears twitching at every unfamiliar sound. The attendant stayed alert too. He left bowls of food and water closer to the store now, never too far from reach, and kept the wrench near the door. But deep inside, he knew the stranger was biding his time, watching, preparing. On the seventh night, the silence broke. The dog's ears shot up first, catching the distant hum of an engine long before it reached the station. His body stiffened, his chest rumbling with a growl. The attendant stepped outside, wiping his hands on a rag, his eyes narrowing as he saw the headlights crawling closer. The pickup truck rolled into the lot. This time, it did not stop at the pumps. It pulled directly to the side, its tires grinding the gravel. The door creaked open, and the man in the long coat stepped out. But he was not alone. Two others emerged with him, their faces hidden under caps, their silhouettes sharp against the lights. One carried a rope, the other a heavy sack. They moved with purpose, spreading out to block every escape route. The dog's heart pounded. His paws shifted, ready to bolt, but his instincts screamed, there was nowhere safe to run. He lowered himself, teeth bared, eyes burning with defiance. The attendant shouted across the lot, "Leave him alone! He's not yours!" His voice echoed into the night, but the men did not stop. They advanced slowly, carefully, as hunters would with cornered prey. The dog's growl deepened, echoing in his chest like thunder. His muscles tightened, ready to fight, though he knew the odds were against him. The strangers spread wider, their steps measured, deliberate. And then, lightning cracked across the sky, a single flash illuminating the entire scene, the hunters closing in, the attendant standing with only a wrench, and the dog crouched low, loyalty and fear raging together inside his trembling body. The moment stretched like glass about to shatter. And in the stranger's eyes, gleaming with cold determination, lay the promise that tonight would not end like the others. The night was suffocatingly still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. The faint flicker of torches cast trembling shadows across the ruined walls, while silence pressed heavily upon those who dared remain. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble, soft at first, then growing into a violent shudder that tore through the earth like a roar from the abyss. The air split with the deafening sound of stone cracking. Walls groaned, towers swayed, and deep fissures spread across the ground, swallowing everything in their path. People screamed as the very soil beneath their feet betrayed them, pulling entire homes into the darkness below. From the distance, a sound unlike any thunder rolled across the sky. It was low, guttural, almost like a warning growl. The torches sputtered, their flames stretching unnaturally tall before snuffing out in the sudden gust of a cold, merciless wind. Panic erupted. Mothers clutched their children. Men shouted for help, their voices lost in the chaos. The ground heaved again, a monstrous surge that sent people sprawling. Stone cracked open like brittle bone, releasing a choking stench that reeked of sulfur and death. Some fell to their knees, praying desperately, while others tried to flee, only to find no escape. Every path collapsed, every alley split apart, turning the city into a maze of fire and shadow. The earth itself had turned against them, and no force of man could stop it. And then, silence. For a single, terrible moment the world fell quiet. No screams. No movement. Only the sound of dust settling into the hollow darkness. But in that silence, all who remained alive felt it. This was not the end. It was only the beginning of a wrath that none could withstand. The night deepened over the ruins, and a heavy silence settled across the shattered land. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and iron, a reminder of the fury that had swept through hours before. Survivors walked like shadows, their faces pale, their eyes hollow, whispering prayers under their breath. From the distance, the cries of the wounded echoed faintly, mixing with the low rumble of collapsing walls. Yet in the heart of that devastation, a circle of men and women gathered, their expressions etched with both fear and defiance. They knew what had happened was not merely war, it was a message from the heavens. One of the elders stood, his voice trembling yet firm. We have seen with our own eyes what power can descend upon this earth. Cities crumbled, fortresses dissolved into dust, and arrogance was struck down. Tonight, before the stars and before aloe, we must take an oath. Never again shall we walk blinded by pride. Never again shall we forget who holds dominion over the skies and the seas. The group lowered their heads, the flames around them crackling as though listening. Each whispered the vow, their voices weaving together into one. It was not just a promise, it was survival. It was faith reborn in the ashes of ruin. And as the wind carried their whispers into the night, a strange calm swept through the desolation, as if the earth itself acknowledged their silent oath. The battlefield was now a desolate wasteland, lit only by the inferno of burning wreckage and the eerie glow of falling embers. The once proud horizon of the city was fractured beyond recognition, broken towers leaning like dying sentinels and roads reduced to molten scars. The silence that followed each explosion was heavier than the blasts themselves, pressing down on those who survived as if the very air mourned the devastation. From beneath the ruins, muffled cries of survivors echoed faintly, blending with the distant roar of collapsing steel. Some clawed desperately at the rubble, hands torn and bleeding, while others sat motionless, their minds shattered by the scale of what had unfolded. This was no longer a war fought by soldiers alone, it had consumed everything, dragging the innocent into its merciless grip. High above, smoke choked the stars. Jets circled like predators, their engines growling, as if waiting for the next command to rain down destruction. And yet, amidst the chaos, a strange tension lingered. It was the sensation that something greater than men or machines was stirring, an unseen force pressing down upon the land, making even the conquerors pause. A young boy, barely old enough to understand what war meant, stood barefoot in the ash. His small frame shook, not only from fear but from the chilling wind that carried the stench of burning lives. In his hand, he clutched a fragment of torn fabric, once belonging to his mother. His eyes, wide and hollow, reflected the flames as if they had swallowed the last remnants of hope. But even as despair clawed its way into every soul, whispers began to ripple through the survivors. Whispers of a reckoning, of an ending that was not written by generals or governments, but by something far greater. The shattered horizon was no longer just the wreckage of a city. It was the edge of something unseen, the beginning of a storm no weapon could contain.